The desert air was thick with the grit of sand and the acrid tang of diesel fuel, a relentless reminder of Marcus Tank, Rodriguez's deployment in a war zone 8,000 miles from home at 6:47 a.m. local time. His satellite phone buzzed with an urgency that cut through the haze of exhaustion. The screen lit up with his sister Maya's name, her voice trembling through the static, laced with panic that made his gut clench. "Tank, she's cutting your locks. She's got bolt cutters and a tow truck. She's stealing your Jeep right now." The metallic clang of bolt cutters, snapping through his security chain, echoed through Maya's phone, a sound that reverberated in Marcus's chest like a gunshot. Each snap was a violation, not just of his property, but of everything he stood for as an Army Reserve MP recently accepted into a federal drug task force. That Jeep, parked in the driveway of his late grandmother's house in Willowbrook Estates, wasn't just a vehicle. It was federal property loaded with $347,000 worth of classified surveillance equipment, GPS trackers, encrypted radios, covert cameras used for active cartel investigations. And Bethany Kensington Wright, the self-appointed dictator of the Willowbrook Estates HOA, had just declared war on the wrong federal agent. Marcus sat in a communications bunker, the texture of sand grinding between his teeth, the smell of fear sweat mixing with the faint hum of military machinery. His mind raced back to Willowbrook, a suburban hellscape where every house was painted the same shade of beige, where sprinkler systems hissed on automated timers, and the scent of fresh mulch couldn't mask the stench of entitlement. His grandmother, Rosa's house, inherited 3 months ago, was supposed to be a safety net, a place to rent out during his deployment, to build equity, to honor the woman who raised him after his parents died in a car crash when he was 12. The house still carried her essence, the warmth of homemade tortillas, the faint sweetness of Bene perfume, the creak of floorboards that held memories of her voice. "Mijo, stand up to bullies, but do it the right way." Bethany Kensington Wright was the bully Grandma Rosa had warned him about. At 52, she was a real estate agent with a white Lexus SUV and a ruler she used to measure grass height with obsessive precision. 7 years as HOA president had transformed her into a suburban tyrant. Her husband Carl's city council seat, giving her an aura of untouchability. She sent violation notices for Christmas lights left up past January, fined residents for unprofessional, garden gnomes, and wielded the HOA bylaws like a scepter. But Marcus had learned, through Maya's tearful calls, that Bethany's rules were a fiction. The real bylaws, buried in Grandma Rosa's 1987 paperwork, exempted government vehicles, emergency services, military, law enforcement, from her fabricated restrictions. Bethany was making it up, counting on residents being too intimidated or ignorant to check. 2 weeks into his deployment, the first violation notice had hit his inbox: unauthorized commercial vehicle storage. His government-issued Jeep Wrangler, marked with federal law enforcement decals, was deemed an eyesore. The fine was $50 per day, accumulating while he dodged bullets in a desert half a world away. Maya, a middle school teacher with a voice as gentle as her classroom demeanor, had tried reasoning with Bethany. She drove to the HOA president's pristine Colonial, armed with copies of Marcus's deployment orders and an offer to cover the Jeep with a tarp. Bethany's response was ice cold. Rules are rules. If your brother cannot follow simple community standards, maybe this neighborhood isn't right for your family. Maya's voice had cracked during that call, the sound of her sitting in Grandma Rosa's kitchen, surrounded by the scent of vanilla candles and the weight of helplessness. "Tank, she threatened to put a lien on the house. She said Carl knows people at the school district, that supporting you could affect my job." The revelation burned in Marcus's chest like shrapnel. Bethany wasn't just targeting him. She was waging war on every military family in Willowbrook. The Johnsons, a Marine family, were cited for a loud motorcycle. Sarah Martinez, a Navy wife with a deployed husband, was fined for her garden gnomes. The pattern was clear. Bethany was systematically harassing service members, using fake violations to intimidate families who couldn't fight back. The desert heat pressed against Marcus as he processed Maya's latest call. The clang of those bolt cutters wasn't just a sound. It was a declaration of suburban warfare. Bethany had escalated from violation notices to outright theft, hiring Discount Dave's towing to seize his Jeep. Through Maya's phone camera, streamed live to his bunker, he watched Bethany in her bathrobe, hair disheveled, directing the tow truck with the frantic energy of a woman unraveling. The driver, a burly man with a nervous glance, took one look at the Jeep's federal decals and backed away. "Lady, this is government property with federal markings. I ain't touching this for any amount of money. It's abandoned property," Bethany shrieked, her voice cracking, spittle flying in the morning air. "I'm HOA president with legal authority to remove community violations." Her words, captured on Maya's security camera, were a gift, Exhibit A in what would soon become a federal theft case. Marcus's training kicked in, his mind shifting from soldier to federal agent. He activated the Jeep's remote security systems, standard for task force vehicles. GPS trackers pinged, motion sensors whirred, and covert cameras began recording every move. The moment Bethany cut that lock, she triggered a federal alert system, pinging Homeland Security databases across 3 states. This wasn't a local crime. This was potential terrorism. Marcus contacted his task force supervisor, Captain Sarah Chen, through emergency channels. Her voice was calm but lethal. "Rodriguez, how fast do you want me to make this woman's life complicated?" Within minutes, federal marshals were dispatched to Willowbrook Estates, lights and sirens cutting through the suburban dawn. But Bethany, oblivious to the storm she'd unleashed, made her fatal mistake. After the tow truck driver fled, leaving tire marks on the asphalt, she changed the locks on the community gate, effectively imprisoning Marcus's Jeep and blocking federal access. If he wants his precious military truck back, he can follow proper HOA procedures. She spat at Maya, waving the new keys like a demented warlord. Military service doesn't make him above community standards. The texture of rage coursed through Marcus's veins, tempered by the cold precision of his training. He was 8,000 miles away, surrounded by the machinery of war, yet helpless to protect his sister from this suburban terrorist. But Maya's voice, trembling but resolute, carried a spark of defiance. "Tank," the neighbors saw her. Mrs. Patterson was watching from her window. She called Tom Henderson, the Vietnam vet. "They're not letting this go." Mrs. Patterson, a 91-year-old widow who'd buried 2 military sons, had witnessed Bethany's meltdown from her front porch. Her call to Tom Henderson, a 72-year-old veteran whose son had served 3 tours in Afghanistan, sparked a community uprising. By 10:00 a.m., Grandma Rosa's house was surrounded by neighbors, veterans, military spouses, ordinary residents who'd lived in fear of Bethany's reign. They formed a human shield around the Jeep, Tom Henderson planting an American flag in the lawn. "This stops right here, right now," he declared. "You want that boy's vehicle, you go through 30 American veterans first." Maya's next call brought a lump to Marcus's throat. "Tank, you should see this. The whole neighborhood is here." Mr. Henderson brought his flag. "Mrs. Chen is making coffee for everyone. They're not leaving." The sound of community solidarity, of neighbors standing against tyranny, was a balm to the helplessness that had gnawed at him. But Bethany's response was pure suburban fascism. She filed emergency complaints with every agency in the phone book. Police, claiming veterans were forming armed militias. Fire department, alleging explosive hazards. From military equipment, code enforcement, fabricating violations about unauthorized assemblies, even animal control, claiming emotional support dogs were attack animals. Each false report was another federal crime, piling onto her growing list of felonies. Marcus's counterpunch was surgical. He contacted Staff Sergeant Patricia Williams at JAG, the military's legal arm. Her reaction was immediate and fierce. "Rodriguez, this woman just threatened to steal federal law enforcement property. That's not an HOA violation. That's a federal felony." The Service Members Civil Relief Act protected deployed service members from property harassment, and Bethany's actions, cutting locks, attempting to tow a federal vehicle, violated multiple statutes. Williams filed a formal complaint with Base Command, triggering a federal military liaison review. Bethany's suburban power trip was now on the radar of people with real authority, but the real twist came from Maya, whose teacher instincts had turned her into an accidental detective. Digging through Grandma Rosa's old HOA documents, she found a smoking gun, a 2019 letter from Bethany to the City Planning Commission, recommending against military housing assistance programs in Willowbrook. The reason transient military populations don't maintain long-term community investment standards. Translation: Bethany had been trying to keep military families out for years, targeting them with fabricated violations to drive them away. The Hendersons were cited for their son's improperly stored bike. The Washingtons were fined for their baby's excessive noise at night. This wasn't random tyranny. It was organized discrimination with Carl's political backing. Maya's voice grew stronger as she relayed her findings. "Tank, she's been systematically targeting every military family that moves here. It's not just us, it's a pattern." The texture of aged paper crumbling between her fingers as she photographed evidence, the sound of her sharp intake of breath as she realized the scope of Bethany's corruption. It all fueled Marcus's resolve. This wasn't about a Jeep anymore. It was about dismantling a suburban criminal enterprise that preyed on military families. Bethany's next move was pure desperation. She hired exec safe security to patrol community standards compliance. 2 guards in a white SUV documenting Marcus's Jeep hourly as if it were a terrorist threat. Worse, they spread lies to the neighbors, whispering that Marcus was dangerous, that military vehicles posed security risks. Maya called in tears, her voice cracking over the satellite connection. "Tank, they're saying you're unstable. Mrs. Patterson won't even make eye contact with me anymore." The sound of her sobs mixed with the desert wind, igniting something cold and hard in Marcus's chest. These bastards were destroying his family's reputation while he was stuck in a war zone. He accessed the Jeep's security footage remotely, revealing a chilling truth. At 1:43 a.m., Bethany was caught on infrared cameras, using a flashlight to peer into the Jeep's interior, photographing classified dashboard equipment, even attempting to open the doors. She wasn't alone. Security guards were with her, taking detailed photos of federal communications gear. This wasn't harassment anymore. This was potential espionage. Marcus relayed the footage to Captain Chen, whose response was chillingly direct. "Rodriguez, this is tricky. If we come in too heavy, we validate their claims that your vehicle is dangerous. We need them to hang themselves." Maya, meanwhile, was building a network of resistance. She reached out to other targeted families, collecting violation notices, threatening letters, and stories of intimidation. The Johnsons, the Martinses, the Washingtons, each had been harassed with fabricated rules. Maya's teacher instincts, honed from years of spotting patterns in student behavior, recognized Bethany's tactics for what they were: a coordinated campaign to force military families out, likely tied to Carl's luxury condo development deal. Military vehicles and deployment schedules hurt the exclusive community marketing angle, and Bethany was clearing the way for profit. The community dynamics were crumbling, and Maya was paying the price. Parents at her school questioned whether a military family with security issues should teach their children. Her principal called her in for a conversation about community concerns. The smell of chalk dust and fear filled her voice during their next call. "Tank, they're destroying my career." Bethany told the PTA that military families bring instability and security risks. The texture of helplessness tasted like sand and rage, a familiar feeling from deployment. But this was personal. Suburban terrorism against his sister, waged while he was powerless to intervene. Marcus's response was calculated. He instructed Maya to record everything, leveraging her phone to capture every interaction. When Exec Safe's lead guard cornered her in a grocery store parking lot, demanding details about Marcus's military activities, she was ready. "Are you suggesting my brother, who's serving overseas protecting our country, is a threat to American families?" she asked, her voice steady despite the tremor Marcus could hear. The guard's response said, admitting they were investigating the Jeep's surveillance equipment, was gold, captured on Maya's recording and sent straight to Captain Chen. Chen made one call, and Exec Safe's federal licensing was under review. The guards vanished overnight, their company now facing investigation for unauthorized surveillance of classified equipment. Bethany, panicking, filed more false reports: police, fire, code enforcement, animal control, each one documenting her obsession with federal property. She had no idea she was building a federal case against herself, one false report at a time. As the sun rose over Willowbrook, the neighborhood was no longer the silent, beige prison it had been under Bethany's reign. Neighbors whispered over fences, shared stories of harassment, and rallied around Grandma Rosa's house. Mrs. Patterson baked cookies for the growing crowd of supporters. Tom Henderson organized veteran patrols, their boots a quiet promise of resistance. Maya, her fear giving way to fury, became the linchpin, coordinating evidence that would soon topple a suburban empire. Marcus, still in the desert, felt the tide turning. The clang of those bolt cutters had awakened a sleeping giant, not just him, but a community fed up with tyranny. Bethany thought she was fighting a helpless soldier and his sister. She didn't realize she'd declared war on a federal agent trained to dismantle criminal organizations, backed by a neighborhood ready to fight for justice. The war had just begun. And Bethany Kensington Wright was about to learn that suburban entitlement was no match for federal consequences. The desert sun was a relentless hammer, pounding Marcus' tank. Rodriguez's bunker with 120-degree heat, but the real fire burned in his chest as Maya's voice crackled through the satellite phone. "Tank, she's burning documents in our backyard," she whispered, her words sharp with disbelief. "Bethany's out there with a trash can, torching HOA records like some kind of suburban witch." The acrid smell of burning paper and lighter fluid seemed to drift through the connection, mingling with the diesel and sweat of Marcus's deployment outpost. It was 3:17 a.m. in Willowbrook Estates, and Bethany Kensington Wright, the HOA tyrant who'd cut the lock on his federal task force jeep, was now destroying evidence under the cover of darkness. Marcus's mind, honed by years of military police training and his new role in a federal drug task force, shifted into overdrive. The clang of those bolt cutters at 6:47 a.m. had marked the start of this war, but Bethany's midnight bonfire was a desperate escalation, a sign she knew the net was closing. His jeep, parked in Grandma Rosa's driveway, wasn't just a vehicle. It was a $347,000 arsenal of classified surveillance equipment, and Bethany's attempt to tow it had triggered Homeland Security protocols. Now her frantic document, burning, confirmed what Marcus suspected. Her suburban empire was built on a foundation of corruption, and she was terrified of exposure. Willowbrook Estates, with its identical beige houses and manicured lawns, had been Grandma Rosa's sanctuary, a place where the scent of her home-made tortillas and Benet perfume lingered in every creak of the floorboards. Marcus had inherited the house 3 months ago, a safety net to rent out during his deployment. But Bethany, the 52-year-old HOA president with a white Lexus SUV and a ruler for measuring grass, had turned it into a battleground. Her fabricated violation notices $50 a day for his eyesore government Jeep were just the start. Maya, his sister, and a middle school teacher had uncovered the real HOA bylaws, proving military vehicles were exempt. Bethany wasn't enforcing rules. She was inventing them to harass military families, backed by her husband Carl's city council influence. Maya's transformation from frightened teacher to accidental detective was the heartbeat of this fight. Her latest call, describing Bethany's backyard bonfire, came with a new edge in her voice, fear giving way to righteous fury. "Tank, I'm watching her through the window. She's shaking, dropping matches, muttering about military troublemakers. I've got it on my security camera." Marcus's Jeep, equipped with infrared sensors and motion-activated cameras, had already caught Bethany photographing classified equipment days earlier. Now, Maya's own cameras, installed after the tow truck incident, were documenting a federal crime in real time, destruction of evidence during an active investigation. Marcus leaned into the bunker's comms console, the texture of sand grinding under his boots. "Maya, keep recording, don't confront her, send the footage to Captain Chen." His task force supervisor, Captain Sarah Chen, had been looped in after Bethany's lock, cutting stunt-triggered federal alerts. Chen's response to the earlier footage, Bethany peering into the Jeep with a flashlight, accompanied by exec-safe security guards, had been chillingly strategic. Let her hang herself, Rodriguez. Now, with Bethany burning records, she was tying the noose tighter. Back in Willowbrook, the community was waking up to Bethany's unraveling. Mrs. Patterson, the 91-year-old widow who'd sparked the morning's uprising by rallying neighbors, had spotted the glow of the fire from her window. She called Tom Henderson, the Vietnam vet who'd planted an American flag in Marcus's lawn, and within minutes, a quiet patrol of veterans was watching Bethany's frantic destruction. "She's losing it, Tank," Maya reported. "Tom's got his guys stationed at the property line, just observing. They're not letting her out of sight." Bethany's panic was palpable, but her next move was personal warfare. By 4:00 a.m., Maya discovered her car vandalized, tires slashed, military scum. Spray painted across the windshield in dripping red letters. The sound of broken glass crunching under her feet as she circled the damage hit Marcus like a gut punch. "Tank, they're trying to scare me out of my own home," she said, her voice trembling but resolute. The texture of helpless rage was familiar from deployment, watching enemies attack those you can't protect. But this was his sister, targeted in the neighborhood where Grandma Rosa had taught them to stand against bullies. Marcus's counterpunch was calculated. He called Captain Chen, who assigned a federal protective detail to Maya and other witness families. Agents blending into morning jogs and coffee shop visits, their presence invisible but lethal. Bethany's surveillance was now being surveilled by professionals with arrest powers. Meanwhile, Maya's teacher instincts kicked into overdrive. She'd spent nights poring over HOA records, her classroom, honed pattern recognition spotting $184,000 in embezzled community funds diverted to Carl's development company through fake consulting contracts. "Tank, it's not just harassment," she said, her voice steady now. "They're stealing from the community to fund a luxury condo deal. Our house, Grandma's house, is on their target list." The smoking gun came from a manila folder Maya found in Grandma Rosa's files. A contract between Carl's Kensington Urban Holdings and Eastbrook Development Corporation, dated 6 months before Marcus inherited the house. The subject line read, "Willowbrook Estates Acquisition Strategy, Phase 2 Implementation." The appendix listed 47 properties, including Grandma Rosa's, marked for acquisition facilitation through systematic harassment. Military families, elderly residents, anyone who couldn't fight back was targeted to force below-market sales. The texture of aged paper crumbling under Maya's fingers as she photographed the evidence fueled Marcus's resolve. This wasn't just about his Jeep, it was organized crime disguised as community governance. Bethany's next escalation was a masterclass in suburban desperation. At 5:00 a.m., she approached Maya outside the grocery store, an envelope bulging with $50,000 in cash. Her designer perfume couldn't mask the stench of fear. "This is for your family," she said, hands trembling as she pushed the envelope toward Maya. "Military families deserve better neighborhoods. Take this and find somewhere more suitable for your lifestyle." Maya, her phone recording, responded with the calm of a teacher disciplining a disruptive student. "Are you trying to bribe me to leave my grandmother's home?" The question hung in the air, captured by federal agents monitoring from an unmarked van nearby. Marcus, listening to the audio Maya sent, recognized the legal weight of Bethany's mistake. His federal crimes training had drilled it into him. Attempted witness bribery carried a 5-year mandatory minimum. But Bethany doubled down, hiring a private investigator through Morrison and Associates, the same PR firm that whitewashed political scandals, to tail Maya. They followed her to school, photographed her with students, even tracked her morning jog. The sound of telephoto lenses clicking outside her classroom windows made Marcus's blood run cold. Then Maya found listening devices in her car, planted during a so-called safety inspection. The devices, traceable to Morrison and Associates, triggered the Federal Wiretap Act 20-year sentences for unauthorized surveillance, with terrorism enhancements when it involved witness intimidation. Captain Chen's response was swift. The FBI Counterintelligence Division took over, treating Maya's surveillance as potential domestic terrorism. Bethany's suburban harassment was now on the radar of agents who hunted international criminals. Meanwhile, Maya's documentation became a weapon. She'd recorded every threat, every lie, every violation notice. Her teacher network, leveraging their media expertise, spread the story to veteran communities, sparking outrage. Military Times ran a front-page article, "Suburban Warfare, HOA Targets Deployed Soldiers' Family." Congressional representatives demanded briefings on HOA discrimination against service members. Bethany's desperation reached new heights when she filed false police reports, claiming Maya was mentally unstable and planning violent retaliation against community leaders. She told police that military families were forming armed militias in Willowbrook. Marcus, listening to Maya's panicked call about the accusations, felt the familiar rage of deployment, enemies slandering those he loved. But Bethany's lies were another federal crime. Filing false reports about witnesses during an active investigation was obstruction of justice with terrorism enhancements. The community's response was a tide turning. Tom Henderson organized veteran patrols, their combat boots a quiet drumbeat on Willowbrook streets at 2:00 a.m. Mrs. Patterson's kitchen became command central, her homemade cookies fueling a growing resistance. Maya, no longer the scared teacher, coordinated with neighbors, collecting signatures for an HOA board recall. Most residents didn't know that boards could be recalled with petitions from 25-33% of homeowners. But Maya's civics lessons came to life. Within hours, she had signatures from 67% of Willowbrook residents demanding Bethany's removal. The real bombshell came when Maya uncovered city council recordings obtained through her teacher union's connections. Carl, in a closed-door meeting, had pressured the police chief to ignore military family complaints. These military people bring instability. His voice dripped with entitlement. Their vehicles, their schedules, their problems affect property values. The recording, sent to Marcus, was a federal agent's evidence of a civil rights conspiracy by a public official. Carl wasn't just enabling Bethany, he was using his position to facilitate discrimination, a violation that triggered RICO, the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Marcus, still in the desert, felt the war shifting. His silent preparation, weeks of coordinating with Chen, JAG, and federal prosecutors, was bearing fruit. Bethany's bonfire, her bribery attempt, her false reports, and Carl's recorded conspiracy were building a case that would bury them. But the personal cost was mounting. Maya's principal called her in again, citing community concerns about her military associations. Parents, influenced by Bethany's smear campaign, questioned her fitness to teach. The smell of chalk dust and fear in Maya's voice during their next call was a knife in Marcus's chest. "Tank, they're trying to destroy my career. They're saying I'm a risk to the kids." Marcus's response was pure task force precision. He instructed Maya to keep recording, to document every interaction. Her phone captured Bethany's private investigator approaching her at school, asking about Marcus's military activities. Maya's response was a teacher's masterclass in composure. "My brother is serving his country. Are you implying he's a threat?" The investigators' admission that they were probing the Jeep's surveillance equipment was another nail in Bethany's coffin, sent straight to the FBI. The media explosion hit by mid-morning. Maya's teacher network, working with veteran groups, pushed the story to national outlets. Fox News called for an interview. CNN wanted Maya's perspective. The narrative, Suburban HOA targeting a deployed soldier's family, went viral, generating congressional attention. 3 representatives requested federal briefings on HOA discrimination. Carl's political allies began fleeing, the mayor publicly distancing himself, and his development company's stock plummeted as corruption allegations hit state media. Bethany's final gambit was a smear campaign through Morrison and Associates, who published a community safety report, claiming military families brought crime, domestic violence, and substance abuse to suburbs. The fabricated statistics were a direct attack on veterans, designed to incite discrimination. Maya, reading the report, transformed into pure righteous fury. "Tank, they're attacking every military family in America with lies to make communities reject us." The report, crossing state lines, triggered federal hate crime investigations, elevating the case to RICO-level prosecution. As the day wore on, Willowbrook streets buzzed with resistance. Neighbors, led by Maya, organized a rally at the school where students and parents waved signs, "We support Teacher Maya," and "Military families protect our freedom." The sound of third graders chanting, "Thank you, Mr. Tank's sister," echoed across the playground, a reminder that justice could start with the youngest voices. Mrs. Patterson, Tom Henderson, and dozens of residents stood guard around Grandma Rosa's house, their presence a wall against Bethany's tyranny. Marcus, still tethered to his desert outpost, felt the tide turning. Bethany's crimes, document destruction, bribery, false reports, and hate-fueled smear campaigns, were piling up, each one a federal felony. Maya's documentation, now shared with federal prosecutors, was a blueprint for dismantling a criminal enterprise. The Jeep, still locked behind Bethany's new community gate, was a symbol of her hubris, its trackers and cameras silently recording her downfall. The war was far from over, but Marcus knew one thing: Bethany Kensington Wright had underestimated the wrong family, and the full weight of federal justice was about to crash down on her suburban kingdom. The Willowbrook Estates Community Center was a powder keg by noon, packed beyond fire code limits with a volatile mix of righteous fury, federal authority, and the electric hum of justice long overdue. Marcus Tank Rodriguez, still 8,000 miles away in a desert bunker, watched the scene unfold through a grainy live feed on his satellite phone, the scent of diesel and sand clinging to him like a second skin. The room buzzed with neighbors, veterans, and military families from 3 states, their voices a low roar of anticipation. Federal agents lined the walls, their presence a silent promise of consequences. News cameras from 6 stations captured every moment, broadcasting live to a nation riveted by the story of a suburban HOA waging war on a deployed soldier's family. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and the sharp tang of stress sweat, a stark contrast to the vanilla candles and homemade tortilla as that once defined Grandma Rosa's kitchen. Marcus's sister, Maya, stood at the heart of it all, no longer the frightened middle school teacher who'd called him in tears at 6:47 a.m. When Bethany Kensington Wright cut the lock on his federal task force Jeep. That clang of bolt cutters had sparked a war, and now Maya was a general, armed with months of evidence and a community ready to fight. The Jeep, loaded with $347,000 in classified surveillance equipment, was still locked behind Bethany's new community gate, its GPS trackers and cameras silently documenting her crimes. But this moment, in the community center where Bethany had ruled like a suburban dictator, was the reckoning. Bethany arrived late, her white Lexus SUV pulling up to a gauntlet of protesters waving signs, "Military Families Matter," and "Prosecute HOA Terrorists." The sound of her designer heels clicking across the asphalt was drowned out by veterans chanting, "Thank you for your service," directed at Maya, not her. Bethany entered like a deposed warlord, her face a mask of defiance masking panic. Carl, her city councilman husband, shuffled behind, his posture broken, the weight of his collapsing empire visible in his slumped shoulders. The texture of their desperation radiated through the room, a stark contrast to the resolute faces of the neighbors they'd terrorized for years. Maya took the podium first, her transformation complete. The scared teacher was gone, replaced by a national advocate whose voice carried the weight of federal backing and congressional attention. For 5 years, these people used their positions to wage war against military families. She began, her words slicing through the room and echoing across social media live streams. They fabricated rules, embezzled funds, and coordinated discrimination campaigns that violated every principle this country stands for. The crowd erupted, applause shaking the windows like thunder. Marcus, watching from his bunker, felt Grandma Rosa's presence, her voice echoing in his memory. "Mijo, stand up to bullies, but do it the right way. This was the right way." Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Martinez stepped forward, flanked by evidence boxes that represented months of Maya's meticulous documentation. Her voice was a judicial sledgehammer, each word landing with the weight of federal authority. The United States government has compiled overwhelming evidence of criminal conspiracy involving federal property theft, civil rights violations, witness intimidation, embezzlement, and obstruction of justice. The charges hit like a roll call of Bethany's felonies: cutting the lock on Marcus's Jeep, a federal theft; bribing Maya with $50,000 to leave; planting listening devices in her car; filing false police reports claiming military families formed armed militias; and burning HOA financial records in Grandma Rosa's backyard at 317 A.M. Each act was a federal crime documented by Maya's recordings, Marcus's Jeep cameras, and a community fed up with tyranny. Tom Henderson, the 72-year-old Vietnam vet who'd planted an American flag in Marcus's lawn, spoke next, his voice trembling with emotion. "My son served 3 tours protecting this country's freedom. These people thought they could spit on that sacrifice for their personal profit. Today, they learned they were wrong." The room roared again, veterans and neighbors standing as one. Mrs. Patterson, the 91-year-old widow who'd sparked the morning's uprising, sat in the front row, her eyes bright with the satisfaction of seeing justice unfold. She'd buried 2 military sons and refused to let another soldier's family be destroyed. Marcus's moment came when he joined the feed remotely, his voice cutting through the bunker's hum and the community center's noise. Bethany Kensington Wright thought she was cutting locks on some soldier's personal vehicle. He said, his tone cold and deliberate, honed by years of dismantling criminal organizations. What she actually did was interfere with an active federal drug operation, compromise classified surveillance equipment, and steal property belonging to the United States government. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. The Jeep wasn't just a vehicle. It was a critical asset in cartel investigations spanning 4 states. Its surveillance gear worth $347,000. Bethany's face drained to the color of old concrete as the scope of her stupidity sank in. But her real crime wasn't stealing my vehicle. Marcus continued, his voice steady despite the rage burning in his chest. Her real crime was waging systematic warfare against military families, using government corruption to steal from the community that trusted her, believing suburban entitlement trumped federal law. The crowd exploded into a standing ovation, shouts of "Lock her up." Mixing with justice for our heroes, a federal marshal Jennifer Torres, a no-nonsense agent who'd arrested cartel bosses and domestic terrorists, stepped forward with handcuffs gleaming. Her expression was predatory, the kind that made criminals realize their amateur hour was over. "Bethany Kensington Wright," Torres announced, her voice carrying through the speakers, "you're under arrest for theft of federal law enforcement property, conspiracy to violate civil rights, embezzlement of community funds, witness intimidation, and obstruction of justice." The click of handcuffs echoed like a gavel as cameras captured the moment suburban tyranny met federal consequences. Bethany's defiance crumbled, her eyes wide with the dawning realization that her HOA kingdom couldn't shield her from federal prison. Carl tried to flee through a back exit, but federal agents, anticipating the move, were waiting. His arrest was quieter but no less satisfying, his political career dying in real time as news cameras rolled. The unraveling of Bethany and Carl's empire revealed a deeper rot. Maya's documentation, spread across Grandma Rosa's dining table, exposed $184,000 in embezzled HOA funds diverted to Carl's Kensington Urban Holdings for a luxury condo deal. The contract with Eastbrook Development Corporation targeted 47 properties, including Grandma Rosa's, for forced sales at below-market prices. Military families, elderly residents, and anyone who couldn't fight back were marked for acquisition facilitation through fabricated violations. The real HOA bylaws, unearthed by Maya, protected military vehicles, exposing Bethany's rules as lies. Worse, Maya found violation notices sent to Grandma Rosa during her final hospice weeks, citations for property maintenance failures that spiked her blood pressure and haunted her final days. "Tank, I think they killed her," Maya had whispered, her voice breaking. The stress of those notices, she kept asking if we'd lose the house. The community center meeting wasn't just a trial, it was a revolution. Maya's petition, backed by 67% of Willowbrook residents, had triggered an emergency recall election, stripping Bethany of her HOA presidency. Maya was elected interim president by acclamation, her first act freezing all HOA accounts pending federal investigation. The crowd cheered as she took the gavel in the same room where Bethany had terrorized families. The sound of justice served cold. Maya's teacher network, leveraging media expertise, had turned the story into a national movement. Military Times, Fox News, and CNN covered the suburban warfare against military families, sparking congressional hearings. 3 representatives sat in the front row, taking notes for legislation to protect service members from HOA discrimination. The federal case was a masterclass in precision. Assistant U.S. Attorney Rebecca Martinez explained the RICO charges. Bethany and Carl's actions, embezzlement, fraud, civil rights violations, and witness intimidation, formed a pattern of organized crime affecting interstate commerce through Carl's development deals. The bribery attempt caught on Maya's phone carried a 5-year minimum. The listening devices in Maya's car triggered the Wiretap Act with 20-year sentences. False police reports and the smear campaign through Morrison and Associates, claiming military families brought crime and instability, violated federal hate crime statutes. The investigation expanded across 17 states as other military families shared similar stories, Maya's documentation methods becoming a model for federal prosecutors. The community's transformation was the real victory. Mrs. Patterson's kitchen, once a place for cookies and quiet resistance, was now a command center for neighborhood patrols. Tom Henderson's veteran network ensured Bethany's midnight schemes were impossible, their boots a steady drumbeat on Willowbrook streets. Maya's rally at the school with students chanting her name had shifted the narrative. Parents who'd questioned her now waved American flags, their signs a testament to community solidarity. "We support Teacher Maya." The smell of barbecue and freedom filled the air, replacing the stale fear of Bethany's reign. Marcus, still in the desert, felt the weight of Grandma Rosa's lessons. Stand up to bullies, but do it the right way. The right way was this: a community united, a sister transformed, and a federal case that would set a precedent. Bethany's 8-year sentence with no parole and $647,000 in restitution was announced later, but the community center moment was the true climax. The judge's words would become legendary. "Your systematic harassment of military families represents domestic terrorism disguised as community governance." Carl's 6-year sentence and lifetime ban from public office ensured his development empire collapsed with $3.2 million in settlements for affected families. Maya revolutionized Willowbrook's HOA, implementing the Willowbrook Military Family Bill of Rights, a national model for protecting service members. Grandma Rosa's house became mission control for the Rodriguez Foundation for Military Family Rights, Maya's new calling after leaving teaching. The Veteran Memorial Park, built on the site of Bethany's seized home, was a community vote for healing, children's laughter replacing the echo of her tyranny. Property values soared 31%, military families flocking to a neighborhood that celebrated them. Marcus returned stateside weeks later, stepping into Grandma Rosa's kitchen, where the scent of vanilla candles was gone, replaced by the smell of fresh hope. Maya, now married to Captain Chen's brother, a Navy veteran, led strategy sessions with Congressional staffers. Marcus, dating federal prosecutor Elena Martinez, bought the house next door, waking each morning in the neighborhood they'd saved. The Rodriguez Military Scholarship Fund, born from lawsuit settlements, sent 23 military children to college, each graduation a reminder of their victory. The final moment came at Willowbrook's first Freedom Day celebration, where military families gathered in the park, sharing stories of triumph. The sound of children's laughter mixed with veterans' pride, the smell of barbecue filling air once poisoned by fear. Maya's hand in Marcus's felt like Grandma Rosa's blessing. Old Glory flew over houses where military families lived without fear, a daily reminder of what they'd won. Justice served, community healed, and bullies defeated. Not with fists, but with the right way. Evidence, unity, and the unrelenting force of federal law.
If you liked this story, please like, subscribe, and share it with others so they can learn something from it too.